I
can
started
record.
if you, unless you want to record. I don't know. I started it already. It's
Yeah,
fine.
I did too, just in case,
All
something
right.
happens with one, then we're good.
Is Dr. Hayes here?
I'm looking, not yet, and we're missing Dr. Hughes as well. So as soon as they join, we can get started.
Thanks, everybody. So we're just waiting for our other two panelists to come onto the Zoom, and then we'll get started.
Okay, just to respect everybody's time, we're gonna get started with just the introductions of our panelists. And if they join eventually, we'll get to hear a little bit more about them. But hello, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Monica, and I am the president of the Minority Health Professional Mentorship Program. I would like to welcome all of you to the research panel discussion hosted by us MHPMP in collaboration with APSA, the American Physician Scientists Association. So before we get started, I just wanted to give a warm thank you to all our participating panelists here today. Um, Dr. Mobley, Dr. Hayes, Dr. Hughes, and Dr. Bose. These individuals are very busy professionals. They have very, very busy schedules. And they have dedicated some of their time tonight to come here and give us a little bit of an insight on their journey and how research has impacted their careers. So I would also like to thank everybody who's here tonight joining us in the Zoom. I'm aware it's midterm season and this has been a very untraditional semester. So thank you for joining us and supporting MHPMP and APSA. For those of you who are part of both organizations, the attendance links will be shared with you guys in the chat at the conclusion of the event. That way you will receive points for participation. So who is a Minority Health Professional Mentorship Program? We are an organization at the University of Florida that seeks to foster mentorship between minority undergraduate students and minority professional students. What we offer in this club is mentorship. It is a program that revolves completely around mentorship. We pair upper division students with lower division students in the professional and pre-professional schools at UF. We offer volunteer opportunities, research opportunities in more traditional semesters. We also have a lot of guest speaker panels as this one. And we also include for our students, interdisciplinary events, connections, and leadership opportunities, as the e-board has been active members of MHPMP in previous years. So that's what we offer.
So hi everybody, I'm Audrey, the president of the American Physician Scientists Association. So we are a local chapter here at UF aiming to help students who are going to be future research-oriented healthcare professionals. Specifically, physician scientists is the majority of the students in our organization, but we welcome all who love research and who are participating in research. We offer our members research, volunteering opportunities, various conferences for research presentations, different interdisciplinary events, mentorship, workshops, connections, and leadership. And actually this year we were able to do a physician scientist mentorship program a little bit with MHPMP kind of helped us through that. And we love having our students who are loving research. So thank you, everybody.
Hi guys, so first up we have Dr. Amy Mobley. She is a PhD and a registered dietitian here at UF, and she is currently my PI, and she leads the nutrition education and behavioral lab. Our work really surrounds just understanding influences on dietary behavior and definitely in underserved populations, and there's just a ton of different
Oh, I'm just coming back. I'm just getting something for my car.
And yeah, we're really glad she's here today, and she has a lot of expertise in just community nutrition and specifically in pediatric populations.
Thank you, Dr. Mobley, for being here. Next, we have Dr. Stacia Hayes. She is a board certified pediatric nurse, a PNP, and has been the director of the Doctor of Nursing Practice Program and coordinator of the Pediatric Primary Care Nurse Practitioner track here at the University of Florida. She is currently practicing in Gainesville, Florida. In addition to focusing on clinical education, she teaches health policy, nursing leadership, and quality improvement processes for both undergraduate and graduate students. So thank you, Dr. Hayes, for being here tonight.
So next we would like to welcome Dr. Stephen Hughes tonight. Dr. Stephen Hughes is a professor and chief of surgical oncology at the UF College of Medicine. He serves as a vice chair as well for the Department of Surgery. His current NIH-funded research focuses on improving the understanding of the biology of pancreatic cancer and aims to discover new methods for the diagnosis and personalized treatment of this terrible cancer. So thank you, Dr. Hughes, for joining us here tonight.
I would like to introduce Dr. Prody Bose. He is an associate professor, he currently holds joint appointment as an associate professor in the Department of Anesthesiology and Department of Neurology in the College of Medicine and Midnight Brain Institute. He is the associate director of the Brain Rehabilitation Research Center, a national VA rehabilitation R&D center, and deputy associate chief of staff and research at the North Florida South Georgia Veterans Health System. Dr. Bo's main research area are spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, and stroke. He is also the University of Florida graduate faculty in the College of Medicine, interdisciplinary program, and a member of several committees of the VA health system. He has mentored numerous graduate and undergraduate students, postdoc, NIHK awardee, VA career development awardees, and clinical fellows for their research dissertation. And thank you for all those panels that will join. And now we'll move on to our questions. So for the first question, we will now stop screen sharing so you can all see that the panel's faces. So our first question would be, this is open to everyone, all the panels here. What made you choose a career in research, and why did you pursue the degree you required to conduct research? For example, if you require MD only or MD PhD, and things like that. And if you're ready to speak, you can just unmute yourself.
Dr. Mobley, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I guess my track was maybe a bit different. I discovered the field of nutrition science because I was interested in science as well as education, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And when I was inquiring with an undergraduate advisor, she told me about dietetics and that I could practice as a registered dietitian, but I also could pursue a higher degree such as a PhD and be involved in more of an academic setting. And I said, okay, that sounds great. And I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into. And she told me at the time when I was an undergraduate that I really should get research experience if I wanted to go to graduate school. So I started inquiring with faculty in my department at Penn State University to get some research experience, and then went on to earn my registered dietitian credential and my master's degree. And then I worked for several years as a dietitian before I decided to go back to get my PhD. And that's really, I think, when I became a lot more involved in research. And the research that I was involved with was actually related to the military. And I was able to do a research study with active duty military service members at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. So I was in a clinical setting, but it was more of an outpatient sort of project where we were conducting research to help the soldiers lose weight because they were required to meet certain weight standards. And I was earning my PhD at the same time. And so that sort of set the course for me as I was earning my PhD to eventually become employed in an academic role as faculty and continue my interest in sort of obesity and obesity prevention and treatment, and currently more focused on children or families with young children. So I hope that answered the question, but it may be a little bit different probably than some of the other panelists, which I think is good. It's nice to have a variety of sort of experiences to learn from.
Yeah, it definitely is. So Dr. Hughes, do you want to go next?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the invitation. This is thrilling. I knew I wanted to go to medical school all the way from high school, and I kind of thought I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon and fix knees. And I think it's okay to change where you're going along the way, would be the first thing I'd tell you. I didn't have any notion of being a scientist at that point in time. I got into it, in all honesty, to try to polish my my resume to get into medical school. But it found it, I enjoyed it. And then I took 2 years as a resident. I stepped away from my clinical training and spent 2 years just doing benchtop research and really dove into cancer biology. And at that point I was hooked. And so my first job I took was actually at a VA. where they guaranteed me over half of my time would be focused on research and the other half would be taking care of patients. And so I have the dream job, to be honest with you. I'm a scientist, I'm a teacher, and I'm a doctor. I don't think it gets much better, but with all that does come a fair amount of stress. And well, it's 6:15 and here I am, I'm still working. So happy to do so.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hayes, do you want to answer?
Sure. Yeah, so so I'm glad you have kind of a variety of us on the panel because what I do isn't really research per se. So I started out as a registered nurse, working on pediatric units in a pediatric intensive care unit, and I saw a lot of patients, really vulnerable kids, and I wanted to make sure that they were getting the best care and the best outcomes possible. And I remember thinking, well, we're doing the same thing to this patient, but it's not working as well as it did with this patient. So kind of what's going on? And luckily, when I graduated from nursing school, I was able to work at Shands, which, back then still was even the premier institute. And we were always encouraged to use the evidence. So as I moved along, I went and I knew I wanted to be a nurse practitioner because I wanted to really impact families to make sure that I was there at the beginning for them to be able to take the best care of their kids. And when I got involved with that, I didn't realize all that really meant, but I really got interested and involved in what we call now evidence-based practice, right? Looking at the evidence and implementing it into a setting. And to me, that's the best part of research, right? Because I really didn't want to be behind in a lab doing all those little minute things that scientists do per se, but I get to do the fun part of science. I get to take the science that's out there that people have said this should work, and I get to figure out based on my population, based on the people I work with, based on the families that I work with, that this would be the best thing to try to implement in my setting. So I get to kind of translate that science into real life, which makes it really exciting and makes it come to life. Because if you don't have anybody doing the research and putting into practice, the research is pretty useless. So I've been able to really continue that. And once I really kind of caught that bug as a nurse practitioner, I knew I wanted to go back to school and get my doctorate so I could really dive into that and really learn the science and the methods into doing it right. And then to be able to go back and teach other people how to do it. So it kind of just fell into place. It was kind of one step at a time, and each door that opened interested me into another step.
Thank you.
The last one, so as you heard, all kind of different perspective of three other members of the panel. My journey actually started in 1991 when I came in this country and doing my fellowship training in neurotrauma. So as a neurologist, after residency training, when I was doing my fellowship training, as a part of the requirement that you have to do some research. Of course, I selected something that possibly I could do, but soon I realized I truly didn't know anything about research. And in the lab, he was the dean of the College of Medicine. He had a lot of students at the time. I was first 7 days humiliated, actually, that I didn't know anything. I was not a bad student, a good clinician, but the problem is, being a medical doctor, often you do not have research training. This is the fact. It's not only in this country, any part of the world, because I studied at least another 2 different countries. So, and understand the medical science, the regimented coursework never had the opportunity to learn how to do research. I'm talking about really research, career research, not a kind of voluntary research, just like a fun. So sooner I realized I need to do something. So of course, invested a lot of time and effort. And as Dr. Hughes says, once you hook into it, you really love it. And unless you have that passion, you cannot do research. It is really sometimes complicated, boring, and time consuming. So unless you like it, it is very difficult. So I finished my fellowship, but realized research is a lot of fun. And especially I'm in neurology, we do not understand how central nervous system actually changes after neurotrauma or neurodiseases. Still, it is a big mystery. And at the time, it was much more complicated, I should say, a lot of unknown. So to know that, I decided to do PhD because I need to do more advanced research knowledge. So I did my PhD after that. It took another 4 years to understand more research, how to do an organized setting and do a clinical and basic science integration into a laboratory setting. So that's the shortest story, but here I am, as Dr. Hughes says, long hour, but we love it, side by side, we do a lot of different things and we like it.
Yes, so thank you for those wonderful first answers. So I'll kind of segue into the next question, which is, how significant is the research in your field and what part of healthcare does it focus on? And then how can you advance your respective fields with research in general and the research that you're doing? Maybe Dr. Mobley to start us off. Oh, maybe. I don't know. For some reason, Dr. Mobley, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I think you're on mute or your microphone.
All right, Dr. Hughes, why don't you take it away for this next question while she figures that out?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can
Oh,
hear you.
yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Mobley.
I couldn't hear the question though, for some reason. It was really.
Oh, that's fine. I can repeat it. So
if
the
you wouldn't
question
mind, that would be great. Thanks.
how significant is research in your field and what part of healthcare does it focus on? And then how can you advance your respective field with the research that you're doing?
So University of Florida is an R1 research intensive university. And with that, as a faculty member on a tenure track line, fortunately, I'm already tenured, but it's a very high expectation. It's sort of, you don't really have a choice. And I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, I knew what I signed up for, so I like what I do. So it's an expectation, getting grants, funding some of my time, training students, and publishing important findings that will impact the field. So dietetics per se isn't really an expectation to do research, but being that I'm in a more of an academic setting, it is an expectation. But I do have colleagues in an academic setting that have more of a teaching intensive, I'd say, position. We're coming to University of Florida because we are a high-ranked research-intensive university. It's a pretty significant expectation. It's 50% of my role. I also have teaching responsibilities and service responsibilities overseeing our graduate program. So I hope that answers. Does that answer the question? Hopefully.
Great. Dr. Hughes, you can go ahead.
That is a multi-step complicated question. I'll tell you a couple of things about why I do what I do. One is that when I stepped into the lab as a resident to take a couple of years and do nothing but research, about 8 months into it, I was in the dark room developing a Western blot, and the result came up, and I knew something that nobody else in the world knew, and that what I thought was going on was going on. And I'm sorry, I've never had cocaine, but my guess is that's like a shot of crack cocaine or a private jet or something like that. Once you've had that feel, you just want it again. And then the second thing is that as I was finishing up my residency, a friend of mine who was a few years ahead of me and was a liver transplant surgeon took me through a liver transplant in a 2-year-old who weighed 12 pounds. And I did virtually that entire operation with him. Of course, he did the operation, but we did about 4.5 hours. And he looked at me and said, "Steve, 4 years ago, all I dreamed was being able to do a liver transplant." Then I said, "Man, maybe I can do it with a fellow." And now I've done it with a chief resident. I'm glad I have a lab, because clinically, if it weren't for the research, I'm bored. I can, you know, believe it or not, being a doctor or being a dietitian or being a nurse, the work becomes routine. The people you take care of, the relationships, the people you care for make it fun. But research also gives you exposure to trainees, to learners. That makes it even more fun. And that it's always new makes it even more fun. So for me, that's that kind of triple component of it. Believe it or not, you can get to a point where you can do these big operations, and then you can start doing them with less help, and down to the point that that's not the point. The real question is how can we do it better in the future? And that's what gets me pumped up. And I'm sure that's probably true for Dr. Hayes, Dr. Behose, Dr. Mobley. And to have the learners on board as well. It just makes it even that much more fun. It challenges you. So that'd be my answer to that complicated question.
Thank you. Dr. Bose, you can go ahead.
Yes, as Dr. says, there's quite good number of components in this question. Let us start to how significant is research in my field. So any field of research is significant. I should not say my one is more significant than others. Only I can emphasize that how important it is in terms of what I do. Neurotrauma is a complicated and devastating healthcare problem. People become paralyzed, has other significant sensory and motor losses, bowel bladder problem, especially after spinal cord injury. Traumatic brain injury has also memory problem, anxiety issues, and this is all complicated issues. After all this different Iraq war and Afghanistan, it became even more problematic too in this country. So altogether, problem remain also that we do not know too much about the nervous system, how they reshape after the injury, and how much actually intervention can help. So all are experimental. There is some treatment, but nothing curative, nothing miracle that can occur. So more people engaged in healthcare research, especially nervous system injury, perhaps the objective is same, how to improve the quality of life of this devastating disease. And that we are trying to do. In my case particularly, I do more preclinical research and bridging between preclinical and clinical areas. So since my clinical background and extensive research PhD training, I should say, gave me opportunity to do both. That means basic science research at the same time, clinical science, clinical science research side by side. So my laboratory focus modeling of neurotrauma, especially spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, and stroke, and try to understand what is the pathophysiology over the course of the disease, how we can understand the disease process, and anywhere the molecular machineries we can change by different type of intervention, which is we use pharmacological drug, which is not FDA approved. Some of the things we use transcranial magnetic stimulation and locomotor training, or a combination of multiple therapy. So to understand the level of injury, what devastating nature of the problem, and how we can focus one by one to intervene. So that's the kind of lab work we do, but there is a lot of unknown. Now, the third part of the question, how can we advance in this area? It is a dream, right? As a researcher, as a faculty in the College of Medicine, in any college, I think what we can do, of course, job duties is different, but the dream is to improve the quality of life. And so that is the reason we do research. And hopefully my contribution will be very minimum at the end of my life, but anything I could do to make the platform with people like you, a student, different time you guys come to my lab or any lab to understand and continue. We hope next 50 years from now, possibly nervous system will understood much more better and therapy will be much more better, and we can see some curative treatment in the future. And possibly that will be taken by you, not me. The dream is there and we are going and working together. I will end there.
Thank you, Dr. Bowles, for that answer. Dr. Hayes, you can finish this one off.
Yeah, so I myself don't do kind of the generate new science and new knowledge research. But there, nursing does have nurse researchers, and the goal of nursing research is to really figure out a way to deliver better healthcare services. Really, there's a lot of crossover between medical research and nursing research, and the nursing research is really what they're trying to find out is how do you improve quality of life for patients, encourage patients to make healthy choices, ensure patient safety, provide comfort and care. So there is a lot of crossover. So it's pretty fascinating, and thinking about how to advance research. I think we're starting to see that the more that we're collaborating across disciplines, the more we're finding out, and the more we're succeeding in research. Just as in the medical professions, nursing as well, they can be PIs on investigations, they can get NIH grants and things like that. But I think as long as research overall continues to demonstrate that we are improving the care of patients and that patients do better with what we're discovering, I think research is going to be able to continue, and people are going to continue to support it and fund it. At least that's the hope.
Dr. Hayes is too modest. It's about 20 years from when we discover something before practice actually is changed by it. What she's doing is accelerating that. It's implementation science. It's every bit as important as having a mouse held down on a board or a pipette in your hand.
I do agree with that. And that's why I get so excited. You had your story about the transplant surgeon. So I worked in pediatric liver transplant for 12 years. And so I was thinking about your story, and what excited me about that is I was thinking about the science, and I was on an NIH consortium called Studies in Pediatric Liver Transplant. And what we did is we took the research about how kids were managed after transplant with their rejection medications and their steroids to figure out which kids were not dying and to be able to change the protocols. So that, to me, looking at kind of the big picture and the little pieces that you could tweak here and there, as opposed to kind of that little narrow focus, that to me just, be in the lab with that one theme, to me isn't very interesting. So that's why I really like what I do.
Yeah, and that little boy from 25 years ago is now a young man with children of his own.
Oh,
and the same liver that I sewed in, well, I didn't. My mentor did, is still working for him. It's a pretty awesome experience.
Awesome. Transplant's amazing. Yeah.
And Dr. Mobley, we just wanted to ask, how do you see your role changing in the healthcare field? And if you have any comments you'd like to add, I'm definitely open to hearing it. Yeah, her sound might be out again, but
Can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. I have a defective webcam. I need to get fixed, and I have to unplug it and replug it in for it to anytime I mute it. But I wanted to just echo some of the comments that were made about when I was training to be a dietitian in sort of a clinical setting, doing my internship. And I remember there were certain dietitians that would carry around journal articles with them as they were seeing patients, because they were reading the latest research and doing like what Dr. Hayes does, is implementing sort of the cutting edge and sort of testing and looking at the evidence. And I thought, wow, they're really looking at this next phase, or sort of the cutting edge information, and not just doing, sort of the monotony of everyday practice. And I recognized I didn't want to be in that everyday, just seeing patients. I was kind of going to be bored. I already could predict and knew I wanted to take it to the higher level and contribute to the research, but also in an applied fashion. So the types of work I do are more applied and looking at impacting programs and policies. But how do I see my role changing in the healthcare field? So I don't see patients currently in practice looking at improving nutritional status of individuals living in the community, sort of free living, impacted by issues or diseases like obesity. But with COVID-19, we've had to become very creative, obviously, in reaching families in different ways, and currently looking at more mobile health, telehealth methods of reaching individuals, or even conducting our research. So I was fortunate, I was already sort of on that track of collecting data and developing outreach and education for particular topics related to nutrition. And when COVID-19 hit, we were able to continue that for the most part because we were doing it using technology. So I just see now that even bringing my own children to the physicians, we're doing more telehealth or sort of creative ways of continuing some of the projects that we were doing. And Alex, I know that you've been really involved with that, and we appreciate you continuing with all of the new challenges that we face. So that and food security has been a big issue for families that we work with. And so that's obviously going to be, that's going to be the priority in people's mind. If they don't have food, then our recommendations of what they should eat are sort of not going to be a priority. It's figuring out ways to creatively ensure that families have enough food and sort of meeting basic needs before we can sort of think about looking at the choices that they're making of food. So I think those are really timely issues that we're facing that I think will continue to perpetuate the field that I'm in.
Thank you. And Dr. Hayes, we wanted to ask you the same question, like how do you see your role changing in the healthcare field as well as research in that role?
Gosh, well, you know, wow, this is such an exciting time to be in healthcare. A little scary, but really exciting. I mean, with COVID, I mean, the wheels just got blown off the bus, right? So we have to speed up the, translation of research into practice. And I think we're really seeing that, because if we don't, just like Dr. Mobley was saying about, things like, telehealth, patients are going to lose out and they're not going to be able to get care if we don't figure out how to make things happen a lot sooner. We're seeing these bigger and better partnerships with patients before. I think even though we talk about patient-centered care and really kind of helping them lead the team and helping direct care, I think we kind of forgot that because we're so used to knowing and believing that we know what's best. But because we can't always link to our patients the way we used to, I think we're really starting to understand that they really are kind of the ones who are in charge. And I think what I'm seeing kind of nationally and talking to other people is that they're kind of loosening the reins and giving patients just a little bit more freedom to try things out, which has been really interesting. As far as roles changing, I'm looking at it from a nurse practitioner perspective. I think, nurse practitioners all over the country have been, leading healthcare teams and collaborating. And I think it's just kind of been a little bit quieter just because they're, just like nurses and a lot of other organizations, that people just kind of are the workhorses. But I think we're seeing now that nursing is taking a little bit more of a forefront. And I think there's just a little bit more publicity about what nursing does, what respiratory therapy does, how physical therapy. And so all these kind of collaborative teams are becoming just a little bit more known as part of a successful healthcare organization. So I think that's been really exciting. And I think, I've been thinking about the term new normal, and I'm glad I'm not hearing it as much, but what I like to say is we're just kind of reshaping our view of what can be and what we can do. And I think if we keep it positive, I think that our patients and the professions are just there's no way to go but up. I mean, we just have to keep our eye on the prize.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to be asking Dr. Hughes and Dr. Bose, how has the medical field changed in the past 5 years? And what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
Please, Dr. Bose, go first.
Okay, sure. 5 years is not long time in medical research. I started in 1991. We're still doing very little, I know. Of course, there are some significant changes in our understanding what I do or what the field I work in. But last 5 years particularly, there's a meaningful understanding, and human genome was basically first published in 2000. After that, the genomic information in information technology expanded quite a lot. So we know some genetic makeup, especially nervous system, and some of the Alzheimer's disease or some kind of, stroke population, even some of the stroke population, why they don't respond to equally to some of the therapy, especially the heterogeneity of some of the genetic makeup. Those informations are very helpful, especially available last couple of years. And next 5 to 10 years, I do not see too much changes. I have a slide I cannot show you. I teach the neurorehabilitation. If we can consider the last 100 years in neurorehabilitation, since 1900 to 2000, there are a lot of medical discoveries. I can say insulin, penicillin, influenza vaccine, polio vaccine, heart transplantation, AIDS virus identification, release of human genome. So those are the big discovery. But within the next 10 years, who knows what will happen? But the COVID changed a lot, with healthcare and all kind of burden. But I think artificial intelligence use in medical field and information technology in the human genome and translation of some of those facts to clinical trial will be also important. Since I do a lot of MRI, I have my own MRI facility in the VA hospital. So I do pretty advanced MRI sequence used in neurotrauma, which is we don't see in the clinical practice normally, because of many reasons, insurance and others. But I hope within the next 5 to 10 years, some of the high field MRI can be guidelines in future that can be helpful to see even the mild form of TBI to detect that, and a therapy can be customized. That's possibly can happen, but who knows? Some miracle can happen, and we, of course, optimistic to see that good days. Okay, thank you. Dr. Hughes.
Good answer, Dr. Bose. So I'll tell you this, in the last 5 years, we have doubled the average survival of a pancreatic cancer patient. And I think in the next 5, we'll double it again. It's not great. We've gone from 4 to 9%. And I think that within the next 5 years, we'll get to 20%. So for me in my little niche, that's a big deal. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, you won't let me. Okay. Monica, can you let me share my screen?
Yeah, I believe you can go ahead and do that right now.
Let's see, here we go, right here. I'm going to show you this. So this is a pancreatic cancer. The cancer is the little blue cells, and then the body's response to it is stained in brown. Can you all see that? Pretty
Yes,
straightforward, right? And so this is what we do in our lab. We're trying to understand how the body responds to pancreatic cancer from an immune system response. And this is something that one of my fellows in the lab brought me along. I said, the immune system has nothing to do with pancreas cancer. I couldn't have been more wrong. But to make a long story short, if you look down towards the bottom with the green, this is the body's response. These are called cancer-associated fibroblast or tumor-associated stroma. This is the body's response to the cancer. It is producing buckets of proteins that influence how the body responds from an immune system perspective. It's actually presenting the broken genes that are driving the tumor to the immune system in a way to say, put up with this. And then if you look at the other way, we're looking at these cancers and understanding what's wrong with them with the EpCAM, CK18, CK19. And so I think in the next 5 years, we are going to be much more effective in having our own body's immune systems eradicate tumors. And as a surgeon, that's just going to give me more work to do, believe it or not. There's a wonderful story by a guy that's been at the NCI for years doing immunotherapy. There's a woman who was 50 years old with a couple of, like 3 children, some grandchildren on the way, and she had colon cancer and it had spread all over her body. And this guy gave her an immunotherapy and actually got her own immune system to recognize her tumor. And it wiped it out except for one spot in her lung. And a surgeon went in and took out that one spot. And it turned out, I don't know how much immunology you all know, but a cancer, a broken gene gets presented to the immune system through the MHC class system. So it was being presented in what's called class C to the T cells that were responding and eradicating the tumor. And this particular spot in this patient's lung, that piece of the DNA got lost. And so this one little spot that the immune system couldn't recognize because it wasn't being having that immune system being presented properly. So that, I think, is the kind of stuff that I'm really excited about. That's what our lab's working on, trying to understand how cancer fools the body to think that it just needs to be fixed, not eradicated. And I think these are the kind of discoveries that over the next 5 to 10 years that are going to just absolutely turn how we practice upside down. And as a surgeon, I think it actually is going to make me busier. And you can take your screen back.
I believe you can. There you go. Thank you for sharing that slide. I think it's really, really cool. Amazing. Now we're going to open the question forum to the participants in the Zoom. So if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask our panelists, you can unmute, raise your hand, or drop them off in the chat and we will ask for you guys.
And if you guys didn't see, Dr. Mobley did have to go. So she said if you have any questions, she did leave her email in the chat so you can ask her directly, or
I was in the middle of reading my thing.
Or in the form, you can like leave a question and I can relay it to her and then share her answers. So, but we did thank her and we really appreciated her spending her time with us.
Well, I know there's one question that was asked earlier that Dr. Mobley answered before she left in the chat, but it is, does a publish or perish environment affect you or the work in your field? Maybe Dr. Bose for that one.
Say again the question a little bit loud.
Of course, it's, does a publish or perish environment affect you and the work that you do in your field?
Yeah, of course, that is always kind of the evolving situation. You need to adjust continuously when you do research, and that always, affect either positively or negatively. But
Dr. Hayes, I'm sure you have some feelings about that. Right now, you talk about COVID. I have 5 people who are funded through extramural funding, whose jobs are dependent on me writing grants that are funded. Yes, research is stressful. I mean, to be successful at it is stressful. I think that's what you're getting at. That discovery I described earlier, where I was in the dark room and saw something, until that came together into a figure and then came into 5 figures and 2 tables and actually was published, who cares? Unless you publish it, nobody else knows. So, at this point in time, the people who are writing grants are brilliant. They're all hardworking, and 1 in 5, probably closer to 1 in 10 will actually get funded. So, yeah, publish or perish is the wrong way to look at it. It's a stressful job. You just have to be willing to take that on. And I think Dr. Bose put that very nicely earlier, which is that if you're passionate about research as part of your life, then that will drive you to, on a Tuesday night, stay up till 11 or 12 writing a grant or getting that paper revisions submitted. And if you're not passionate about it, it's just torture. And as a division chief, I've seen faculty struggle with that both ways. There's those that are passionate about it and they love to do it and they write grants for every cycle and they tend to be very successful. And there's faculty that actually honestly run the other direction just because they just really have a hard time with actually the scientific process, which can be fairly brutal. And I think about that all the time. I'm on a couple editorial boards. I review grants. Nobody's meaner to one another than scientists. And so I see Dr. Hayes kind of smiling. Anybody who's written a grant or submitted a paper, been part of that, has had the experience of having been told you're an idiot, you know, or what were you thinking? And you need to get past that. And that's one of the fun things I have with my learners. And if all of you, if you ever go through that, you're not alone. In fact, if you've never gone through that, you just really haven't been doing it very long. and be ready for that. And those people actually are really nice people. They come up in the morning and they intend to do well, but somehow they just get almost mean. It's the nicest people in the world. It's amazing when they start to review papers or review grants. They take out that red pen and just feel like they're your middle school English teacher and they just have to tell you, you know, you could have done this so much better. Mm-hmm. So this is a really important subject. Yeah, I think, yes, research is stressful. Funding a lab is not easy, but it is worth it if you've got that passion. And I have not met anybody who's truly passionate about research who has then taken the time to write a grant every cycle who has not met with success. So I want you to understand that, you know, as long as you're willing to understand that some people are going to take out a red pencil and say things that are somewhat hurtful, you can be successful in this. You just have to be tenacious and drive the ball to the hoop.
And so in nursing, I'm fortunate because in nursing, we have a non-tenure track and a tenure track. And so I was deliberate in choosing to be a clinical faculty, which is non-tenured. So although I don't have to get funding and grants, I still have responsibility to produce scholarship is what we're calling it instead of research per se. So I still have to have an area that I focus on. And my area of scholarship is vulnerable populations and high-risk populations. So I do a lot of research, or I say research, but presentations and scholarships, and a lot of publishing on human trafficking patients of human trafficking victims. I do a lot on transplant patients and patients that are children who have chronic illnesses. So I still have a body of work that you can find that's really my focus area. And so I still have a certain amount of publishing that I have to do. I still have to have some kind of responsibility outside of the university. So I'm treasurer of a national organization. I still belong to committees. I still have doctoral students that I mentor. So I still have responsibilities, but it's not, because I'm not on a tenure track, it's not, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be promoted and then I'm not going to have a job within the 3 to 7 years as it, specific on a tenure track. So nursing is a little bit different, and there may be some other health professions that do that as well. I'm not really sure, but.
Thank you. Those are great responses. So yeah, research is definitely hard. What would be a great time or a time that is best to start learning about research? Would that be undergraduate, or should people go into special PhD program to learn more about research, or learn it on their own and things like that? And that kind of go along with Dara's question, like if you could go back in time to undergrad, what advice would you give yourself to, and kind of go along with that as well?
So Kier, if I go first with this, I can tell you, so I started as an undergrad and I would highly encourage you all to do it now. Don't figure out whether you like research or not when you're in a PhD program. You need to know that you want to be a scientist before you do a PhD program. The second thing I'll tell you is that it's very difficult to really get a true research experience unless you are there, 5 days a week. I'd be curious what Dr. Bose has to say about that, or Dr. Hayes. I mean, I think there's certain things you can do But I would highly encourage undergraduates to like devote a summer, and the university has really actually pretty wonderful programs and support where you can, actually receive a small stipend and get into a lab and truly spend 12 hours a day and weekends and really get that immersion and hopefully have that moment that I had in that dark room or the equivalent of it, where you discover something. So the sooner you do it, the better. And then if you realize that you do have passion for it, you're going to have to figure out where are you going to learn how to design good experiments, where are you going to learn to write a good paper, and then even more complicated at the end of the day, how are you going to learn to run a lab, or just the research regulatory aspects. And then the last thing is, how do you write a grant so that you can actually convince somebody to fund you? Or on the other side of things, there's other ways you can do your research can be funded, whether it's through pharma or other programs, but you need to probably devote at a minimum 3 years of time purely to research to have any chance of truly being independent early in your career. If you want to be like a tenure stream, I think Dr. Hayes really brings up a good point, which is that there's other strategies where you can definitely contribute to the literature, really contribute to our knowledge. There's lots of good answers here. But if you really want to have a bench to bedside, bedside to bench kind of lab like I have, you better be ready for 3 years of just hardcore in the lab science, learning, somebody to teach you how to write, somebody to teach you how to think about how you design experiments, and then somebody to teach you how to write grants. And part of that comes with, you got to review a lot of papers and you got to review a bunch of grants. The only way to get really good at this stuff is to actually read the work of others and be that nice person that I was talking about earlier.
So I will add a little bit because most of the audience here is undergraduate. I think you need to define your objective first. And what is your intention and interest? You combine those things. First thing is your objective. Objective A for your objective is to go medical school. You need to have some voluntary research experience to boost your resume, as Dr. You says he did that. And nowadays it is much more required unless you have medical research involvement in your undergraduate, your resume will be a little bit weaker. So more you put, that will be the icing on the cake. I know MCAT, your GPA, all is important, but that research can give you something add there. But really, if you don't interested actually research, being an MD actually, it doesn't give you the chance to do research and your clinical practice side by side often. It is a hard kind of decision. I can tell you, even in my department, there's a bright, Harvard graduate neurologist we hired as an assistant professor, passionate to do research, but department was not actually giving enough dedicated time to do research. This is the pure money driving business, actually. I'm sorry to put that thing into that, but department always sees if he does 20% clinical work, that will be better for the department. If he does research or learning research, then it is a problem. Unless you have a grant on your hand, then you need to do that because department will give you. But that transition, assistant professor just joined, to break that path with your independency in research and clinical practice is not easy. And a lot of people I see, especially, unless they get a K award and other dedicated, time is allocated, it is pretty difficult. That is why sometimes, they become frustrated, but still academic practice, somebody comes. We see some bright people and somehow they manage to go through and they are successful. As is, Dr. Hughes says, it is your job to write grant and to be successful in your publication. To evaluate that grant, you need publication, you need laboratory, you need independence, all kind of thing. To get all this thing, it is always complicated. But it doesn't mean that I should discourage you. The first thing first, you guys need to involve in research. Unless you involve in research, you don't know how much you will like or how much you dislike. And liking is the most important thing. If you really like something, that will drive you to go there. And I believe that you will be successful. But if you don't have the drive, and if you don't like that, I think it is hard for anybody to get into that. So that is the kind of passion you need to mix up in your life and then go there, But you need to come and research. We need to develop, we need to understand the science. And it is a very, very critical thing. The advancement of science lasts 100 years. If you consider what we didn't know, now we know. And still we know little. So we need to know more to help these people, the patient I'm talking about. And you are in the forefront. So some of you need to come front and join in that movement to do and to get that research more understandable and more applicable. I'll just end there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bose, and everybody who was here tonight. That is the conclusion of the event. Once again, thank you everybody for joining. I am going to be sharing the MHPMP attendance link for everybody to fill out, and APSA just shared theirs. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Bose. Thank you all for joining, and you're welcome to go as soon as you fill out the form. It was nice seeing some of you guys here today. Thank you for participating.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thank you everybody for coming. Don't forget to fill out the forms, and we had a great event and it was super insightful. So, and I love research. So thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Boyce, for joining us. And thank you for the call for research.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
If you guys have any questions, leave them in the chat, and we can relay them to whichever participant you wanted to talk to and didn't get to, but definitely let us know. Thank you for coming.
If you all are interested in any of their emails, you can access them in the chat. I believe Dr. Hayes and Dr. Mobley, as well as Dr. Hughes, left their emails. So if you do have any extra questions, I know some of you reached out privately, you can find those emails there and direct those questions straight to them. I'm sure they'd be super, super happy to answer your questions.
I recopied them again for everybody just so it's easier to find them all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And if you have any questions for us, you can ask too.
Yeah, you can
definitely.
You guys can ask anything in regards to the organizations or any questions regarding research.
I do have a question. So I learned about this organization after your application closed. So is the application going to be open in spring or next fall?
Are you talking about MHPMP?
Oh yeah, like the minority.
Yeah, so we are a semester recruitment program. So yes, our applications are going to be open probably sometime in December once we get them ready for the spring. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. We have our social media, so you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram to receive all the updates. And if you go on our Instagram, there should be a link tree where you can join or subscribe to our emails list. That way you receive all the updates about when those deadlines are going to be. So
Got it. Thank you. And
Yep.
I also have another question because I realized I think you guys are like involved in labs. So I was actually in a dry lab, but I was in there for like 3 months, and then I realized it wasn't like what I like to do, so I left the lab. But for wet labs, I also saw Dr. Hughes replying to me that there's like a 15 to 20 hour time commitment, and since lab is not that easy to find and we can't kind of need to send emails to multiple people, I'm not saying that they're all gonna reply to me, but like, what if there are two people who are like, oh yeah, we do have positions open, like at the same time, and do we try to avoid turning down their offer, or we like space out our emails?
What I would do in that particular case, if you were to get like two interested people, I'm assuming they're going to want to interview you in some capacity, probably via Zoom, just because of everything going on. Do both interviews because it's not going to hurt you. What if one doesn't go right and you realize, like, hey, I don't actually want to work with this person, or I don't actually like the research, like it doesn't, it's not as cool as I thought it was, then, you always have the other option. They're not gonna, it's not rude to turn them down. All you have to say is, I ended up getting offered a position in a different lab and etc. And, just go forward with that and do what's best for you. You know, there's plenty of undergrads. There's not a lot of labs. They'll find somebody else if you choose not to go that route, is my suggestion at least. And just pick an environment, a lab environment that you think is going to be beneficial to you. Because what can happen as well is, like, if you're seeking mentorship and you find out that the PI is there maybe once every 2 months, that's not going to be a good mentorship situation for you. So, really ask those types of questions. Like, if you were allowed to go into the lab, ask the people that are there, like the postdocs. Like, you want to be in a positive research environment also,
Yeah, because like the dry lab that I was at, it was a really nice environment, and it was like really sad to leave it because like the PI was constantly like talking to you, and she was like super encouraging and stuff. But yeah, I was really confused about how the wet lab and like dry lab's different. And since like it was a dry lab, we don't really have to go into the lab. So that's also different. So yeah, but thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. That actually happened to me, and then I just like did the interview, and then I later on I decided which based on your interest, research interest as well, like if you're interested in this field or the other field, and you can decide, and then like you can just send an email. It was like hard to look up how to write rejection letter because I was like not rejection letter, but like so yeah, it was but definitely pick the one that you like. So
Yeah,
you can
it's
like keep switching lab and yeah.
Yeah, because like one of my friend who's I think she's a senior now, and she was just telling me to maybe try to get into any lab you can, but I at the same time I have my interest, which is kind of like sports medicine and kinesiology related, and there's not much lab for that. So that's why I was like, I don't know if I should maybe try more or just focus, like try to get into what I really like.
I
I
mean,
would say the main goal is to try to get into what you like. And you can actually go to
yeah.
like sports medicine department website and like things like that, and then to look for labs like that. And then the difference between dry lab and wet lab, dry lab is more like data analysis, so like more virtual stuff, and then wet lab is like physically go in, like do pipetting, like hands-on experiment kind of that. And there's also the clinical research, like you interact with patients and less bench work kind of.
So sorry, I kind of have a lot of questions. Um, it's so since we are here like undergraduates, we probably aren't be too prepared for. I don't know what they like expect us to do in wet labs, since like I don't know if the school teaches us like what we need to do in that lab. So like I don't know if there's ever a time to be like ready to be in a lab.
I mean,
I
I
think.
can answer that for you. So what?
Uh,
Sorry, my boyfriend's in the office here with me, and he was talking. But what I was gonna say to you is that what year are you, first of
I'm a
all?
second year.
Okay, and do you have research experience?
So I've only been in the dry lab for like 3 months, and I realized it wasn't really what I was interested in. So I think that was it. Yeah.
So essentially, they're not, to be completely honest, they're not, if you're starting out, like this is your first wet lab, they're not going to expect a whole lot from you because you've never been trained, you've never done work in a wet lab before. You know, a lot of labs particularly like that because they can teach you how they do the experiments. Everybody does every experiment a little bit differently. And so they like to mold, especially in wet labs, because there's certain techniques that, you know, they don't want you to know because they want to teach you their way that they do it. So I would say use that to your advantage, kind of spin that in your advantage. I would say as far as skills, the only thing you can really do to prepare going into a lab would be reading manuscripts, get familiar with like the way that things are worded and how science is written and how experiments and figures look and things like that. That's a really good way to prepare. Preparing for an interview for a lab, read some of the manuscripts, like their most recent research. And if you can speak about that, that would be very impressive to a PI or something like that. As far as like hands-on experience, most likely you're going to be trained by a postdoc, a grad student, another PhD working in the lab. They're going to show you how to do different, you know, experiments. The philosophy that I've learned over the years is like see one, do one, teach one, and that's how you learn. So people in science say this a lot, especially once you get into a lab, you'll hear it, is that they want you to watch doing it first. So you start shadowing. That's how I started in my lab. I shadowed. And then I took over to doing it. I did the experiments, but I was supervised. And then now, you know, I'm at the point where I could teach another undergraduate coming into the lab how to do that experiment. And that's essentially like the path to how you're going to learn, you know, specific wet lab research. But they're not going to expect you to know how to do things. They'll teach you everything you need to know.
Got it. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Of course. All right, so unless there's any other questions, I mean, I also just suggest, oh, she left. All right, but thanks guys. Thanks everybody for coming. Unless there's any specific questions, it was nice to have you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, I think we can wrap this up.
Yeah.
So MHP's board is gonna stay on the Zoom link afterwards. So whoever, if you guys don't have any more questions, you guys are welcome to
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, are we just wrapping up then? Sorry, I'm confused.
No,
Yeah.
our board is just staying on like afterwards for like another meeting, but I think everybody else is like gone. So thank you so much for being here today and helping with everything.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Aubrey.
That's cool. What were you saying here?
Oh, I was like, thanks for joining, Aubrey.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Is everyone here?
Yeah, I believe so. Michelle's here.
Take out Audrey.
Are you letting her know here? Okay. I think she froze.
Yeah.
If I can just remove her.
Yeah, I can remove her. I got it.
Did it work? I just tried to, it didn't go through.
Oh, it didn't go through. Hello.
We left the meeting. She's just frozen on here, I think.
Oh my.
That is so weird.
Okay.
She's gone. Okay, she's gone. All right.
She's gone. Okay. Hi, guys. I just wanted to get us all here today to.
Did you stop recording? You should probably stop recording.
Oh, that's right. I'm about to go on YouTube.